ICQ Podcast episode 296, Equinox review of 40 years of BYLARA. Well, hello fellow amateur radio enthusiasts, and welcome to this, our 296th episode of the ICQ Amateur Radio Podcast, supported by Phil Stevenson, Kilo Zero Papa, Whiskey Sierra, along with our monthly and annual subscription donors. In this episode, Martin M1LB is joined by Chris, Mike Zero Tango Charlie Hotel, Martin, Mike Zero Sierra Golf Lima, Dan, Kilo Bravo 6 November Uniform, and Frank, Kilo 4 Foxtrot Mike Hotel, to discuss latest amateur radio news. Myself, Colin M6BOY, rounds up the news in brief, and this episode features a double. It's a review of a fictional book featuring amateur radio called Equinox by Frank, Kilo 4 Foxtrot Mike Hotel, and 40 years of BYLARA, which is an interview conducted by Martin at M1MRB. Well, we can't stress this enough. It's your donations that keep this show advert-free and stops us punting dodgy pills, mattresses and domain names and God knows what else to you. I heard someone the other day selling meat boxes. Well, I don't know, weird. But anyway, Phil Stevenson, Kilo Zero Papa, Whiskey Sierra, is caught up with us at Hamvention, and it reminded him that although he had a monthly subscription set up before with PayPal, apparently PayPal kick you off, and they do. If you change your credit card details or any of your payment details, etc., that they can knock those off. So Phil reset up his monthly subscription to us. So Phil, that certainly does help us out, keeps us advert free, and I hope you continue to enjoy the show that way. Well, guys, I'm going to now hand over to Ed, who's got a message for us about an event he's arranged for you all who are visiting Ham Radio 2019 in Friedrichshafen.
In line with the ICQ motto, a podcast for radio amateurs by radio amateurs, you, our listeners, have the chance to take part in the show if you intend to visit the Ham Radio Show in Friedrichshafen between June 21st and 23rd. We will be having a meet-up and recording session on the Sunday at 10 a.m. from the central area near the QSL wall. Just come along and meet me, Ed, DD5LP in person, and some of the other presenters via Skype, and tell us what you have found at Ham Radio Friedrichshafen, what you liked and what you didn't, and become part of our show from Friedrichshafen. See you at Ham Radio.
Many thanks, Ed. Certainly looking forward to, doing that meetup. It's going to be interesting. First time around us doing it that way, and certainly very excited to do it there. So it's in the calendar, concreted in with lots of ink. So certainly looking forward to catching up with people from Friedrichshafen. So now we join Martin, Frank, Dan, Chris, and Martin as they discuss the latest amateur radio news, including a number of amateurs in France and the 170th anniversary of Morse code. Hope you enjoy.
The ICQ Podcast. Come for a moment. Stay for an hour.
Hi guys, welcome to this episode's ICQ Podcast, episode 296, and tonight we're going to record the News Roundtable for that podcast. Tonight, I'm joined by Mr. Chris Howard M0TCH. Hi, Chris.
Good evening, Martin. Did you say episode 296?
296.
We're 4 away from episode 300. How amazing is that?
I only signed up for 10. I'm not taking any responsibility for any others. We're also joined by Mr. Martin Rothwell M0SGL.
So you said 296, yeah?
Yeah.
That's 104 away from episode 400.
Yeah, well, I talked to Bob Howell at Dayton, and he was telling me he'd just gone over 400. But they do it They do it weekly, and we've done it fortnightly, plus a few extras. So.
What did they do for the 400? Have you seen it?
Not at the moment. It's on my to-watch list, unfortunately.
They had a grand tour. They had a grand tour of a lot of people on it.
Yeah.
Oh, they wouldn't do like the grand tour, like the car show. The Amazon car
right.
show.
So said the guy who is behind the curtain.
Yeah. Now, afraid I'm a little bit behind on things. We've had a mega few weeks, and there's a few more things happening. Mr. Dan Romanchik from the States is with us, KB6NU. Hi, Dan.
Good evening, guys. And I tell you, 300 is really something. I'm stuck on number 10 with my own podcast, and I don't know what's going to happen with that.
Now,
so 300 is great.
Yeah, well, I hope you managed to resurrect it, Frank. Sorry, Dan. I always get you two mixed up, even when I was in the same room with it. But
just remember, I'm the more handsome one.
Yeah. And Frank's the one who's always getting me into trouble, according to Colin. So we also have Frank with us, K4FMH. Hi, Frank.
Hey, good to be with you again. Thanks for having me back.
It's great fun. And for those of you who obviously listen long term, you know that we had a great time in Dayton. And I think the boys are talking about doing it again in 2 years' time, 2021. So potentially, Colin's trying to organise that now. And I'm quite looking forward to it. Right.
If they let you back.
Oh, I didn't upset anybody, apart from the Fox affiliate lady, but that's another story. Okay.
I've already cleared that with Mrs. B. I've given him the backstory. It's good.
I owned up, Frank. You see, if you own up, you don't get into trouble. Okay. Let's start our first news story. The ARRL are considering moving the corporation from CT to DE. Frank, you put this in. Give us a clue.
Yeah, in the draft agenda for the executive committee meeting that occurred while we were in Xenia, Hamvention. So we don't know this occurred, but they had on their agenda moving the location of the corporation of ARRL Inc. from Connecticut to Delaware. Now, many other companies do this. There are no moving trucks backing up to W1AW and towers coming down or anything of the like. It's just a matter of where you're registered as a company. And the upside of this, I think, is the new CEO, Howard Mickle, has kind of probably brought this to the table, is that President Roderick had said a year or two ago that some of the Connecticut corporate regulations was making them go more corporate in their style and legal structure and that sort of thing. And we've talked about that on a previous podcast. So toward that end, I think this is CEO Mickle's way of perhaps cleaning up some of those requirements and making things easier. And I'm sure as Dan is aware, if not more than I, so many companies in the United States have their corporate domicile in Delaware for many of these same reasons. So it's just a paper move. If they approved it, I've tried to contact Howard. He's at CPAC and now on his way to Plano, Texas for HamCon. So we'll find out if they have actually done that soon.
Well, that sounds interesting. And yeah, we have our corporate office in Ireland. Dan, what do you think on this one?
Yeah, I think it's just sort of a paper move, and if it makes the job of governing the corporation easier, I'm for it.
Yeah. Well, it's a business thing, and if it works out and makes life easier for everybody, it's a good thing. Now, I'm going to go to Mr. Rothwell because I'm sure he's going to have something different to say.
Well, first of all, don't tell Colin we've got a corporate office in Ireland. He'll get business cards printed. You know what he's like.
He already has.
Colin,
Orange business cards, clearly.
Yeah.
Now, Martin, I'm going to get him a T-shirt, and it's going to say on the front, "Don't get me started." ... Because on the back, it's going to say, "Because you know how I am."
Yeah.
So anyway, back to the story. Considering move from corporation to CTD, well, initially I think, does this affect me? I mean, with the internet like it is nowadays, every company's on the internet. Does it make much of a difference where what is effectively, I say this in the nicest possible way, an administration organization belong? I don't know whether administration is the right word, but for a company that effectively can work remotely, does it matter where they physically are? You're not turning up to an office, are you?
Well, a lot of people would, but I think it's probably laws and ease of doing business in certain places. I think.
Yeah, I mean, people will turn up, but I mean, okay, America's a lot bigger than England, but major broadcaster here moved to Manchester a few years ago. I mean, okay, it probably affected the people that were turning up to do a job there, but other than that, do the public really?
There'll be an attorney that represents them in Delaware, and that's the only person in Delaware that would show up for work, if you will, but he or she shows up there anyway. That's all that's going to amount to.
Right.
And certainly, I mean, I work in business world, and I know that a lot of the US companies I work with are all based in Delaware. And I believe, like you say, it's just an easy place to do business. Taxes, maybe preferential there. I think in the UK we have a similar thing. We have companies based in Jersey because they have certain preferential reasons for being there. So I think it's just does it really matter to members? I mean, I'm a member of the ARRL. I know some of the guys on the podcast are. Is it going to affect me? Doubt it. Affect me in the slightest. So
might be a different address you send something off to if you're posting to them, but
I would never do it. I mean,
Probably not.
Things online, probably not even that. Like Frank's saying, yeah.
So all in all, it's probably a very good business move. They're looking at it if Howard Mickel's looking at cleaning up some bits and pieces.
If it's moving somewhere where you mentioned, and we only suggest this, we're not saying it for sure, but if it's moving somewhere that perhaps has preferential tax rates, perhaps they're in better facilities, potentially cost saving for its members. Maybe not cost saving for members, but maybe they can do more with the savings. You would hope that any savings they may make would not necessarily go straight into anyone's pocket and would go back into the running of the organisation.
Yep.
Yeah, that's good. That'll be good.
Remember, they're tax exempt, so on those kind of taxes,
Oh,
now, they probably pay employment taxes, but this would change zero. I mean, you still have the same ARRL address. They have a lawyer in Delaware that's their legal representative to the state of Delaware and to the feds. That's the only thing that will change, except maybe, as you say, Martin, they may have a better tax structure and for what they do have to report in terms of employment and things like that. Who knows?
Yeah. So all in all, we agree it's probably a good thing. And, there's a lot happening in the ARRL at the moment. And looks like Howard Mickel is starting to make things move. So can't be a bad thing.
This is Frank, K4FMH, with an editorial postscript. After we completed recording of our podcast, I received email from Howard Mickel, CEO of ARRL, giving some explanation for the agenda item that was subsequently withdrawn. Apparently the thinking was that Delaware would in fact be a better place for the corporate identity for ARRL to be located, but after some review, Howard told me that Delaware is good for-profit corporations, but not so much for nonprofits. He explained that they use a translator statute, which essentially substitutes members for stockholders in a for-profit corporation law. His assessment was that would put an ARRL in a square peg, round hole situation. Therefore, the discussion of it was moot, and they merely withdrew the proposal. This is Frank with an editorial update for the ICQ podcast.
Moving on to our next news story. The number of radio hams in France has increased. In the first 6 months of the year, there have been more amateur radio hams get their license or renew their license, reactivate their license, that is, than the whole of last year. So, looks like ham radio in France is starting to do a bit of a comeback. What do you think, Chris?
Well, I'm wondering what's happened to cause that. I know, Frank, you've got your statistical brain. You'd be thinking, is there a cause? Is it cause and effect? Has there been something that's happened to spur interest? Has there been something on TV? Has there been a film? Has there been some national thing? Has there been some promotion by the National Society? I would suggest there must have been something that's caused them to have this big jump in the number of people wanting to get a license. So, I think to find out what it was and whether or not we can replicate it elsewhere.
Well, I think the key line here is the reaction of many individual codes, I'm going to guess that's call signs, is certainly related to the suppression of the amateur radio tax. So if they did away with the tax, people are going to renew their licenses.
Are you suggesting I should actually read the story before I start talking about it?
Well, I didn't say that. Didn't say that exactly.
The thing is, though, you mentioned have they shown a film recently that's sparked the interest? The cheeky side of me wonders if they've shown Smokey and the Bandit or something like that. I'm also thinking I'm going to be tuning my radio around and I'm like, oh, the bed knobs are flashing. Hello, this is Night Talk calling. Sorry, I'm only joking.
Frankly, that with the Three Musketeers is a winner in my book.
Yeah.
Smokey and the Bandit starring the Three Musketeers.
I think something's happened in France to have, generally sparked the interest of people. Although the skeptical side of me says Are our French friends just looking for a way of keeping in contact with us after Brexit and after our government saw through that telephone line to the UK?
I'd like to know though, under what the tax was. Was it a tax on equipment?
Do you have to
tax
pay
on
like
license?
a ridiculous for your license?
I think this is probably a pretty bad translation. It probably was a fee for a license, and now they're getting rid of it.
Or maybe tax is, if it translates, maybe it, the way Google Translate has done it, maybe it's, maybe the exams have become easier, or a taxing situation or something like that.
In the U.S., very often for accounting purposes, local government will have taxes such as for an automotive license, but then they'll have a fee to register something else, like a boat or something. So who knows? I'm just not aware of what that is in France, but I suspect that Dan's point is probably the headline, Chris, that kind of got it out there. They've cut the tax on this, and I don't know what that was. So you can think about broadcast licenses, if they had a huge tax for them, and suddenly that was relinquished, even in the commercial world, that might get some more people in the business. Who knows? But the other thing, I don't know what the maker world is like in France. We've seen a lot of that here in the States, and I'm sure in the UK, for people building things, and they're using RF, and they get into amateur radio that way. I don't know if that's a possible contribution to it, but clearly the story thinks that at least their ARRL, the REF, says that cutting the tax had something to do with it. I suspect they promoted it when the tax was relinquished.
I think it's put on there, Dan. I've just gone to another page and it just talk about the annual tax. It was €46 for 2019. If you've already paid it, they'll actually refund the money. So I think you're absolutely right. I think it's like an annual license fee. But I think you're right. I think you're right, Frank. I mean, the maker movement is very big in Europe. We've been to Germany, to Friedrichshafen, and there's the maker fair happening at the same time. And there's lots of people there, so it could well be. So sorry, Dan.
Well, I think the ICQ podcast should send me to France, where I can investigate the connection between the increase in amateur radio licenses and French wine and cheese.
Hey, get in line.
Hey, get in line. We all know Big Cheese Radio's got a line.
Yeah, but I said it first.
Yeah, but I've got the cheese hat.
Yeah, you have. And
we should describe Martin Rothwell, by the way.
I will. If people are wondering what I'm talking about, I will put that photo on Twitter at Big Cheese Radio, and you will see why we're talking about me with that.
Yeah. Now, guys, there was one other option, and I can understand why you want to go.
Send you to France for the cheese and wine. Yeah, I've heard that before.
No, that'd be wasted on me because I don't like wine.
Wasted is wrong.
Hey,
anyway.
But in fairness, we'd have to send Mrs. B instead. But no, I just kind of think that seeing as Edmund lives on about 40 miles from the French coast and can work them on VHF 2 meters
and speaks French.
And is fluent in French.
Yeah. Maybe Edmund has been a self-appointed increase in licenses in France. I'm going to have to ask him.
Yeah, could be.
And then we could take the credit for it. But unfortunately, I don't think that's the case.
So where do we stand on the cheese and wine? I think, we can have an ICQ trip.
We can arrange something, I'm sure.
We've got money in the budget for that.
No, but we go on a vow of poverty like we do everywhere else.
We'll have to get a GoFundMe page up on the website.
Yeah.
That's what I was just going to suggest. If Linux and the Ham Shack can do it, we should be able to do it.
Yeah.
Well, listen, to try to lean a little bit more in another direction, perhaps Edmund knows a couple of French hams that he can just ask. And so by the time we have our next team meeting called a podcast, we might have some insight from what do some hams there think.
Yeah. I'm due to get hold of Edmund this week anyway, so I'll run that by him as well and see how it goes. So good, but it's good to see there's an increase. For whatever reason, it's good to see there's an increase. Moving to our next story, 175th anniversary of Morse code. Now, as the boys are waiting to giggle, no, Mr. Rothwell, he didn't have a technician license. It was done over wires, not wires X, 2 wires.
Well, We say about this, and I said in our pre-show chat, he didn't do it on the air, therefore he didn't get on the air. He needs a copy of Dan's book. The fact that Dan hadn't written his book at the time that Samuel Morse invented Morse code is irrelevant. But he could have got a copy of Dan's book and got on the air.
Not only that, he probably used American Morse, not international Morse, which we use now.
Uh-oh.
So we've had this discussion. It's the same discussion we've had about American English. There's no such thing as English, and there is mistakes. Sorry, there are mistakes.
Well, I don't know about that, but
So you've just upset a large proportion of our listeners, haven't you, Mr. Rothwell? I'm going to have to apologise.
You know I can't be trusted.
Yeah,
edit that out if you want, but yeah, I apologise.
Martin can go anywhere twice. Second time to apologise.
Yeah.
So, what do you think of this, Dan? What do you think of
it? I'm always in favor of commemorating Morse code events, and this is actually, as we said too, this is actually the 175th anniversary of the first telegram being sent between Baltimore and Washington D.C. And I mean, I love Morse code, so I'm always in favor of talking about it.
And the original digital mode.
Well, I'm still not convinced it's digital, but
on and off, zeros and ones.
Yeah, I know it's
it's
zeros and long ones. It's it's short ones.
Yeah. It's more than
and get this, in American Morse, there's actually 3 lengths of DAs.
Whoa.
There's T, which is a short DA, L, which is a little bit longer DA, and 0, which is the really long DA.
Have you ever heard that on the air?
Well, no, because you apparently that's okay. So that's another thing too. So we have a guy here in the U.S. who writes. He used to work at the FCC, now writes a column for the QCWA. At least he did when last I heard of him. But he claims that American Morse is actually illegal on the air because the Part 97 rules call out the use of international Morse.
But is that not just like talking another language on the air? You can go on the air and speak French. How is that different?
It says for mode A1, or at least it did. I don't know what they call it now. You have to use international Morse code, or at least that's the way he interprets the rule. So that's another little.
And you nuance. And Dan, you said it wasn't Samuel Morse who actually sent it, didn't you?
Well, so that's another controversy too, right? So they really say that Vale, I forget his first name, was the guy who actually developed the code itself.
Alfred Vale was.
So while Morse was the head of the project, Vale, his assistant, developed the actual dits and dots. Sounds
very much like Mr. Udo and Mr. Yagi.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, kind of.
Yeah. So, Frank, what's your thoughts on this one?
Well, I think it simply notes how long that Morse code of whatever variety has been part of our legacy, even before amateur radio, got into being. Because after all, this was Morse for wires, not Morse for wireless. But you can understand when the first transmitters were built, the spark gap. You can understand why they kind of went to using Morse. It was the way you communicated then. So I think it's quite a commemoration. And, to the credit of people like Dan who've been pushing the envelope of continuing, that custom in our hobby, it's kind of gotten more popular, I think, with amateur radio operators. So I think it's a good thing for us to kind of acknowledge.
Yeah, I think it's good. Chris?
I was actually having a tune round on 30 metres the other day. I don't understand Morse, pick out CQ and things, but it surprises me how much Morse traffic there still is.
There's a lot out there.
Yeah, in the days when you can pick up a microphone and talk, you can do all these wonderful digital modes, both on HF and on VHF through repeaters and what have you. And there is still people tapping away at that key or the paddle and loving it. There was masses of activity. Incredible.
Yeah. So, Chris, what do you think? You've seen some of Samuel Morse's other projects, like his painting, but what else? What do you think on this one?
Well, I think 175 years doesn't seem that long ago. Could you imagine before that point in time, the only way to communicate was by letter, by some guy with a horse carrying it on his back, and suddenly this would have been absolutely revolutionised how quickly we can communicate. It doesn't seem that long ago, and just think of all the things that have been enabled because of that. Or, the way we can conduct business, conduct all kinds of things now massively enabled. So that was really a real turning point in history around communications. And of course, like Dan and etc. are still using it today. So I think it's quite an important one actually. It really does. It's a landmark point in time. So yeah, that's kind of my thoughts. And I will say we still use it today. It may not be used commercially today, but it's still very important. As Martin Rothwell was saying, it's still used. We still hear it a lot on the air, which is a great ththing. It's alive.
I was going to say, is there any commercial use for Morse nowadays? Is it perhaps on ships as a backup, or in the event of a satellite outage?
Apparently not. And Dan, you may remember this because of your affinity with Morse code. But I remember a few years ago, wasn't there some episode where the last jobs in the commercial world that used Morse ended? Am I getting something confused here?
Yeah, that doesn't ring a bell, but I wouldn't be surprised.
So it's important, to keep that alive. It will probably only be in the future, as Chris kind of was getting to, a hobbyist mode of communication rather than anything commercial.
Just out of interest, Martin, you probably would know this. We obviously now, our repeaters obviously will squirt out Morse code. I guess, for the likes of Ofcom, people like that have to be able to understand Morse code because our repeaters beacon their call signs. So I guess that's probably one commercial use, or at least actually, an organisation that does it. But do commercial repeaters have to put out their call sign?
Sorry, commercial repeaters don't have to. When I was working for a PMR company, they got quite surprised when I had one of the repeaters putting out its ident.
So
in the workshop.
I can think of a commercial use still. So in the aviation world, they have navigation beacons, and I'm probably the same in the maritime world as well. They still send their identification in Morse, although they actually print on the charts the letters in Morse code, so that person doesn't have to actually know Morse code to be able to understand it. I'm sure pilots, perhaps over the years, pick up on it, but so that's still used. That's still used today in that world.
As an asterisk to this, if you recall, I brought my little portable rig for some of you guys to get on the air in the U.S. with your American call signs, and the MFJ 939 tuner, it communicates back error messages in Morse.
Of course it does.
Yeah.
And actually thinking about it, you realise that when you're sending something in Morse, you could have a voice ident saying GB3, whatever, the call sign. But is that going to translate into every language? Whereas if you are sending out Morse, the letter is the same in every language, but the pronunciation may be different.
Yeah.
Maybe it's clearer for navigation.
Well, we were told not so long ago, Chris and I, that another Navy, and I'm not going to give the Navy away just in case the guy shouldn't have told us, they still use Morse code, but they use it for light communications between ships because they want to be radio quiet.
Right.
And he was saying, the chap was talking, he was saying that the captain still insists that they practice it quite regularly. Actually, he was saying that they make them get on the old. Is it an Aldis lamp that they call it that's used to the shutters that come up and down to?
Yeah, I've seen those.
Send
how many words a minute can you do on one of those?
I don't know.
Not very fast.
Yeah.
My father-in-law actually did that in World War II.
Wow.
Yeah, it's kind of amusing. And if I could throw in one little other factoid here before we move on, the early telegraph systems actually printed out the dots and dashes on a strip of paper, like the stock tickers, right? And then somebody was supposed to read that and interpret it, but the operators got so that it was much faster for them just to listen to the clicks than they have to read it off the tape. So that's why how we got to that point.
And Dan, do you remember when we were at the museum, the VOA museum, when we were over there a couple of weeks ago, and they actually had a receiver, I think, that was a telegraph receiver that was used that did that printed those dots and dashes. And they used to use a tin can or something, which would actually amplify the noise of the relay.
Right. So that's another thing, if you don't mind me going on about it. But in the early telegraph offices, it's a noisy office. and you only had the clicking of that electromagnetic, the sounder. And so they put a tobacco can lid behind the sounder to sort of reflect the sound and make it louder. And in my mind, that's how we got the term lid in amateur radio. Because only a poor operator would require a lid.
Very cool.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, it's another place to go if you like that sort of stuff. If you're ever in Cornwall in the UK, get onto, I think it's Porthcurno, right down on the sort of the far tip of Cornwall, and it's where all the transatlantic cables come into the country.
Yeah.
You can still see the cables running up the beach. I think the ones you can see are no longer used, but you can go into the little hut there and you can see where they come up and where they all terminate. But there's a museum there, and they've got lots of telegraph equipment like that. And I think they've got some of those senders there that are actually still working. I think it's a fascinating place to see, though.
Hey, and there's even an English connection to the to this sounder business because the brand of tobacco they used was Prince Albert.
Was that the specific size of tin that was required? Was it?
Well, apparently that provided the best sound or something, but they used the Prince Albert tobacco lid.
Perfect.
So there you go.
So is this still available? Do we need to say other brands that are available?
I don't know. That's a good question.
I don't know. I'll check on that. Whether Prince Albert tobacco is still available in a tin can or not.
It'll be in a bag with like every other tobacco.
Yeah, probably a vacuum seal bag and whatever. But I'll check next time in a store.
I always remember my granddad used to have the little tobacco tins. I remember them as a kid, but I haven't seen them in years.
Oh, yeah. We used to call them up and say, do you have Prince Albert in the can? And they'd say, well, of course. And we'd say, you better let him out before he suffocates.
you know what you use now if you want to build an amateur radio project? You wouldn't use a tobacco tin now because it's an Altoids.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
interesting history.
Yeah. So I think we've gone way, way off topic, which is not a problem. Not a problem, because there's a lot of interesting stuff in there. I was thoroughly enjoying it. I was never going to stop the boys. And for any new listeners that have just joined us on this podcast, this is pretty normal for us. Our existing listeners kind of like us.
That was amateur radio conversation, wasn't it?
Yeah. It's
you
interesting.
Can edit it if it's...
Yeah, I learned a lot. Anyway, very quickly moving on. New ham radio regulations in Belgium. Now, if you live in Belgium or you're a Belgian listener, don't think I'm being nasty, but it looks like you're coming out of the dark ages. You've been given far more band allocation. Chris, do you want to go first on this one?
Yeah, I can do. So when I first heard, I thought, they're getting more than we're getting, but actually it sounds like they're actually just catching up. I think you were saying earlier, Martin, that they only had up on the 40 metre band between 7.0 and 7.1 megahertz. Now we have in the UK 7.0 to 7.2. And the majority of voice communications happen between 7.1 and 7.0. So the Belgians are missing out there. I know in the States you have 7.0 to 7.3. So we're missing out compared to you guys. So I wonder, maybe at some point we might even get the extra bit as well and be able to talk on the same frequencies as the guys over the pond. But
we've got shortwave stations there, haven't we? Around 0.2 to 7.3.
Yeah, we do. That's true. Actually, we do have broadcast stations, don't we? That sort of area. So they'd have to move, but. I'm sure they won't mind.
Yeah. So there's lots of increases. Frank, what do you think on this one?
Well, being a social scientist, one of the things I see is when you have differentiation and elaboration of rules, it's a sign of growth. And perhaps we need more rules, given our previous discussion on Morse code. But the Belgian amateur group there is going to benefit from this because they have gotten kind of more bandwidth. They have pulled 6 meters off, but as we noted in the pre-show, the TV stations perhaps still operate there, and you get some of those there. But I think it's a good thing. I think they're beginning to indirectly promote the hobby in Belgium through these regulations. Because anytime government does regulations, it gets noticed, and when things get noticed, people take interest in it. So I think I'm glad to see it.
Yeah, well, that's good news. Well, Dan, it probably doesn't affect you too much being a Morse code operator, and at the bottom end of the band, that's where they be. But certainly a nice increase for them, isn't it?
Well, seeing as how I'm the Hawkeye this go around, you'll notice that it says these are changes to the basic license. which is kind of like the novice license or foundation license in the UK. They also have a higher level license. It looks like the UBA calls it their CEPT license. So these are expanded privileges for their novice class, basically.
Okay.
Yeah, but sounds like the ARRL proposal for the technician.
I know, that's what I was thinking too.
Yeah.
Except technicians here can still use 1,500 watts. Their ON3s are still only getting 25 watts. So.
Yeah.
Still more than our foundations get. 10.
Well, what they're supposed to get and what they use are two different things sometimes. But
yes, I know that.
but having said that, if it does encourage more Belgians to get a beginner's license, hey, that's great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you got to get people. You got to give people access to where other people are on the bands, and if they're not being given the right access, then the hobby's going to dry up a bit. What do you think, Mine?
Well, we all get excited about more things, and initially, if you live in Belgium, more bands to play with. Hey, but not sure on how this translates to other parts of the license, other license holders, the equivalent of the intermediates and the advanced. But I can't help but thinking it's a hell of an inconvenience if your radio is coded effectively for country where you bought it and you can't transmit out a band, because suddenly it's either a lot of work for the radio dealers, or there's a lot of people going to be opening their radios up and hoping they're pinging the right diode off.
Yeah. Well, I did that on my ICOM 703 a few weeks ago.
My 7600, I got very brave.
Did you? Yeah. Yeah, it
worked. Ping and it worked.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Get the right diode, don't you?
Yeah, that was the worry, but we did. Sounds like Martin and I both did, so that's good. Moving on, Mexican amateur radio volunteers have provided communications in a wildfire response, and this is nice to hear that outside of the US and the UK, there are guys of amateurs doing this sort of thing. Frank, let's go with you first on this one.
Okay, I was very glad to see this. For those who haven't looked at a map of Mexico, Monterrey is southwest of Laredo, Texas in the U.S., and west of Brownsville and McAllen. And it's at the base of a mountain range. And for those who follow news in the U.S. over the last few years, we've had all these dry fires, wind fuel fires that occur where things get very dry. And so it was very good to see that the Mexican amateur radio community kind of came in and worked together. Some of them used WinLink as well as voice to help on, understanding where people should go and where people should leave and that sort of thing. And I will tell you that they use some very nice HF techniques with steerable portable dipole and things like that, in addition to VHF repeaters. So I just give them my applause.
It sounds to me like they're probably quite a well-rehearsed team, and it sounds like they haven't just turned up and thought, what can we do? It sounds like if they're using things like WinLink, like you say, perhaps they're a group that that are well-versed in emergency communications and swung into action, and it looks like it's been pretty successful.
Well, to get flown in by helicopter, you don't get that kind of support if you just show up at the parking lot somewhere.
With a handheld, yeah, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, so Dan, I mean, you're far, far, far north of any of this trouble, and far north and northwest of it all. But what do you think of this?
Well, so I think this is good publicity. The way I understand it, it's very difficult to get a license in Mexico because the regulations are just, the red tape is just hard to cut through. And, perhaps if this gets to the right officials, maybe they'll make it less of an issue, and we'd get more hams in Mexico. That would be a good thing. Yeah,
more hams means more contacts, and that'll be good. So it's looking good. Mine, before I say something controversial about America and the roads and Mr. Trump trying to get rid of Mexicans, what are your thoughts?
Do you know what I actually thought to myself before we started? If this was another podcast involving coffee or beer, I'd have something very, very cheeky to say here. But I'm going to behave myself and not be cheeky, because I don't want to upset anybody. I've already potentially upset a lot of Americans on here, and I apologise for that. But in this case, all I'm going to say is, I've said it before, I've said it 1,000 times, when all else fails, amateur radio, this is proof. You cannot rely on network-based communications, whether you're talking about your mobile or your cellular telephone, or whether you're talking about repeaters operating, that are running emergency services, radios, Tetra networks, whatever. You can't rely on them. I've said it 1,000 times. I'll say it again. Amateur radio, we can set up a station, we can make it work, and when it counts, we all get those messages through, and nobody else can.
Yeah.
Amateur radio for the win.
Yeah, great. I agree with you. And my comment on American roads, I'm sure Dan and Frank are going to agree with me. You got an awful lot of potholes in your road, don't you?
But we've got a solution for that, Dan, and I'm sure you've seen it too. As we're legalizing the sale of pot, that's got to go to repair the pothole.
Yeah. There was a few moments. A few moments you find a sudden big pothole in the road. You're cruising up the road, bang! You think, what was that? And it was interesting, but I enjoyed my time out there, and I did get to drive, even if I did worry Chris a couple of times. But then he's not the best of passengers in the world, so that's not bad. Right, moving on. Last news story, Chris, you put this one up. Sheffield District Wireless Society, so it shows you how old the club is. They're about to do their 100th year anniversary, because they're called a wireless company, not even a radio company. So, Chris, do you want to go first?
Yeah, Sheffield District Wireless Society, 100 years. So basically, they're centenary. So they were founded June 22nd, 1919, which is amazing. In our club, I was looking at that website earlier. The club we're members of, Martin, was founded in 1946. So this is a good 20-odd years before that. So this is one of the oldest clubs in the UK, I would think. I know the RSGB and the WIN, the ARRL, all sorts of their centenaries in the last sort of 10 years. But this is a local club, 100 years old. I think it's a great story. They're still going today, still active, still website shows doing lots and lots of things. It looks like they're still a thriving club, so I just thought it was a good story to finish on.
Yeah, agree with you totally. Absolutely, totally agree with you. Martin, your thoughts?
1919. How old would you have been then, Martin?
About 3.
Sorry. Part of me wants to sing happy birthday, but has the copyright lapsed on happy birthday now? Can we sing that? Yeah, congratulations to them. And with many clubs struggling to get talks, I know that some clubs are sadly disappearing. But 100 years, it's a massive achievement. Congratulations to them. And here's to 100 more.
Well, it is. And I noticed they're running a special event station. So, Frank, what's your thoughts on it?
Oh, I think it's very much along the lines of what Martin Rothwell just said. A century mark is something that everyone should respect. Certainly anyone who has been involved in leadership in a club, it's got its own challenges. But to survive and now thrive with the complexity and depth of how they're celebrating this century mark, my hat's off to them.
I agree with you totally. Totally on that one.
And Martin, just going to jump in quickly. So you mentioned the special event. Just give a little plug on that. So 22nd of June, from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., I assume local time, they'll be using the special call sign GB0SWS, which is Sheffield Wireless Society. And then also their own society call sign, which is GX5 Tango Oscar on 40, 20 and 15 metres. So listen out for them. And I think they're also talking about using FT8 as well on the 30-metre bands. So that's a good one to try to work.
No problems on that. And equally, the times you've given, -1 hour for UTC. Dan, would you like to have the last word on this one?
Well, I'm just in agreement. Having been involved as a club officer, making it to 100 is a real achievement. So again, kudos to them. That's really great. And I love the fact that you announced their special event. I love special event stations, and I'm going to see if I can maybe work them on 30-meter FT8.
That'd be good.
Yeah,
that'd be good. So, let us know if you do, Dan, and be pleased with that one. Right, well, that concludes our news roundtable. We've gone a tad long, as would normally happen, so that's fun, and hopefully you got a lot out of it. I'm going to ask the guys what they've been up to in radio since we did the last podcast together. Who do I start with? Mr. Rothwell, go on.
Hello. Well, I've actually done some stuff with radio. I was left unsupervised the other day. My wife went out, so I was left home playing with my toys. Nice long chat on 4 meters with a couple of people. That was nice to get back on there. Also, a bit of a lift on 2 meters the other day. So I heard someone calling on 2 meters SSB, so I went back to them, and I forget where he was, about 150, 200 miles away. So I was quite happy with that. Quite nice long chat on 2 meters SSB. Had to program up a couple of radios with some commercial frequencies for work, and I only needed to be able to listen to them, but needed to do it. So got my ICOM ID51 out, went through the whole programming software, and it doesn't matter whether you are using the cable or the SD card method. It will quite happily let you program everything into it. As soon as you hit write to radio, all the changes you've done get deleted in front of your eyes because it's out of band of the amateur band. The radio you can program on the front panel to those frequencies, and it will work quite happily, but the software won't allow you to do it. So note to ICOM, maybe update your software. I wasted quite a lot of time entering the info to only have it just deleted in front of my eyes. Although I did note that Chirp does allow you to program the ID51 with the cable, so that was quite nice. Also, the E92 from ICOM, because it's got a serial cable, updates in absolute real time. So quite delighted with that. So yeah, been spent a bit of time programming stuff up, but all works now, and I can now listen to those frequencies that I need to be able to listen to for work. So all good. I think that is pretty much my what I've been up to in radio in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, no problems. Well, the only thing I've got to do for you at some point in time in the near future is issue you your 2019 orange shirts that the rest of us have.
Hey.
So that's coming your way.
I've got orange shirts, and I've got generic orange shirts. I've got a couple of ICQ orange shirts, but not the official new branded ones.
There you go.
I've not seen yet.
Yeah, you'll get yours soon. They're pretty damn good, aren't they, Frank?
They did well.
So what do you?
They invaded Xenia, but no one was harmed.
Yeah.
The shirts on their own, or were you in them?
We were in them.
Okay.
Yeah, we kind of mobbed people a little bit when we were together, but they certainly showed out. But what are you been up to?
Think you were all a load of Dutch football hooligans again?
No, not this time. That's a European thing.
Okay.
Yeah. So what have you been up to, Frank?
Well, I have added an ICOM 5100A into my shack. It's not completely there yet, so maybe Mr. Rothwell and I can connect on a reflector or something here soon. And just learning a bit about it and kind of deciding how I want to set that up. I've got a separate little antenna in my attic from the bent antenna I use with my Yaesu Fusion rig. Did put up another digipeater and working with another guy, and I can tell he forgot to put, and I forgot to remind him, put the distance. So we've been repeating beacons from 500 to 700 miles away with the 2 meter band openings, and we'll need to put that programming restriction in, and we'll probably get that done. We're close to, if you follow the geography of the U.S., having complete APRS coverage from Louisiana to Alabama along the Interstate 20 corridor. And we'll try to celebrate that a little bit through my ARRL hat as a way of promoting others to let's cover the entirety of the I-55 north-south corridor. So I've been doing a little bit of that work. Added another IT rack in my workbench room and a couple more pieces of Regal hardware, and cleaning up, straightening up, and just kind of moving things along. So kind of recovering from Dayton. Great trip and enjoyed it resoundingly.
Yeah, it was good. I agree. It was good. Dan, what have you been up to?
Well, a couple of things. So I just recently published a set of flashcards for the new general class exam. And it uses a kind of an interesting program called Anki, Alpha November Kilo India. And after you've answered a question, it's all electronic. After you've answered a question, you rate the question as easy, hard, or difficult. And it repeats the more difficult ones to you more frequently than the ones you've marked as easy. So for people that like to use flashcards to study for tests, this should be a pretty good solution. Another thing I did is that when I got back from Dayton, I found a what's called, and this isn't strictly ham radio, I found a Jetson Nano in my mailbox. And this thing is sold by SparkFun and made by NVIDIA. And what this is a board for developing artificial intelligence applications. It's got a 64-core GPU on this thing, and supposedly you can program it to do different AI stuff. And so I started with, the board's only $99, so that's why I bought it. But I started wading into like the programming to use it, and this is going to be a long-term project because that's pretty difficult. But it's still it's kind of cool stuff. And we on Reddit we've already talked about different applications we might use it for in amateur radio, and I just think this is going to be a cool thing to work with.
Yeah. But I happen to know you spent a little bit of time in the flea market at Dayton, and you just couldn't resist that paddle, could you?
No, in fact, I did buy that paddle. Maybe I shouldn't say this, but the guy only wanted $100 for it. And I said, well, will you take 90? He says, no, 95. I said, okay. Well, after bringing it home and using it, I really like it. It's a bencher hex key. And I felt a little bit ashamed that I kind of got him down to 95. I should have just given him the whole 100.
Yeah, well, I mean, as long as you both came away happy, that was the important thing. But that's good. That's good. And as I say,
it is a nice key, though. I mean, I've used it exclusively since I got back from Dayton. I haven't touched my Bengali since. I think I'm going to switch back here pretty soon. But it's not quite the Bengali, but it is very good. I'll just say that about it.
Yeah, so that one won't be being passed on to a student at a later date then.
I still might do that, but it would have to be a really serious student.
Yeah. So all's good in your part of the world. Chris, what have you been up to?
Well, obviously Dayton. I don't think I've been on the podcast since we've been back, so that was a huge amount of fun. Enjoyed meeting our listeners. Lots of listeners came and said hello, which is fantastic. A big shout out, particularly to Scott McDonald, who took us out in Chicago when we went back there. That was a really nice evening we had there. So big thanks to Scott. When I was out there, I bought a few things. I bought. In fact, this sounds quite boring. I bought a couple of batteries for my ICOM handheld, my D-Star handheld. So that gets me back on D-Star. So I've had a handheld and. The battery, I've had this I think about 8 or 9 years, this handheld, and the battery basically failed and I couldn't use it anymore. And it's actually quite a nice little radio. It's an ICOM E91, and ICOM don't make batteries anymore, and they're really expensive. The ones you can buy, they're about £60 each over here. So I bought a couple from Dayton, which is great. So I've now got a fully working handheld again, which is great. Also bought. Is there
anything funny for the planes on that?
Well, actually, it's funny you say that. So when I went through, because I flew 2 flights after, because I flew into Florida after I was in Chicago on the way back, and the guy said you mustn't. The guy asked me when I checked in, he goes, "Oh, have you got any batteries in your bag?" I was like, "Well, I have in my suitcase, but not in my hand baggage." No, he goes, "It needs to be in your hand baggage. You can't have any lithium batteries in your suitcase." I was okay, fine. So I put them in my hand baggage. And then when I went through security, I actually took them out. They say take out your laptops and things when you go for security. I took that out as well. And the guy said, "Oh, that's a smart move." When I went through, so actually, I think that's the thing to do. Just be really open about it. I've got these and had a little bag and a clear plastic bag, and they were quite happy. Well, they didn't say anything about it. I'm not sure exactly what the rules
show them
are.
What's in there, I guess. Yeah.
I was quite open. I had them in the bag, and when I went through, and they weren't challenged. So I'm not exactly sure what the rules are, but they're in my hand baggage and my carry on, as they say, and that wasn't a problem. So that was good. So that's back and working. I also bought from the MFJ stand, I bought a little micro mag mount that's got an SMA connector on the end of the feeder, which means I've had a problem getting a radio into my new car because just nowhere to mount it. So I've now got a handheld in the car attached to an external aerial, so that's good. That's another benefit I've had coming back from Dayton. And I also bought a QCX kit from QRP Labs, which I shall build over the next few weeks if I get some time. So that's what I'll be getting up to shortly, is trying to get that kit working. It's a 5 watts. I went for the 40 meter option. It's a 5 watt CW only kit, But I had a look at the instructions online, and they actually look really, really good. So hopefully I shouldn't have too much trouble putting that together. So that's a good one. And then, things coming up. So, building that kit. And also this weekend, we have a 2-meter contest. We don't do many contests as a club, but we do this one, which is the Practical Wireless 2-meter low power contest. So Sunday the 9th, which I think is actually the day this comes out, this will be released. We'll be on the air with the call sign G2XP Portable. So if you happen to hear this in the morning and you want to kind of give us some points, listen out for that call sign. Probably mainly on SSB, I would imagine, in the 2-meter band. I think Tim's going to try a bit of CW as well. So maybe also some FM as well. So listen out for us, and we may work here.
Yeah, all good. And unfortunately, I can't make the contest this time round. But reason is I'm actually on HMS Belfast. Colin and I are doing a ICQ visit onto HMS Belfast. We wanted to do Saturday. Unfortunately, we couldn't get Saturday. We could only get Sunday through contractual reasons. So you won't get a feature this episode on the ICQ podcast about HMS Belfast. But this weekend, the podcast goes out, is the 75th anniversary of D-Day. And HMS Belfast was very active in the D-Day landings. And we're there trying to capture the spirit of it and from the radio angle. So look out for that in another podcast coming up. Once again, I'd also like to thank Scott McDonald and his wife, Sarah. We had a great time with them in Chicago. Really enjoyed it. And Scott, I will email you shortly to touch base with you on a couple of things we're going to do later in the year that you talked to me about when we were in Chicago. What else have I been doing? Dayton just blew me away. I came back from Dayton absolutely blown away, and it sounds corny, but I'm going to say it anyway because that's what I really feel. There were three things in this order. A was to meet Dan, Frank, and Bill face to face. I've seen them on video. I've spoken to them a number of times, but to be actually in the same room as you guys was just the chemistry was absolutely great, and that for me made it. The other part, the second thing I had on my list was, while I was wandering around, I thought we were going to just be able to wander around almost incognito, although we had the big orange shirts on. And we talked to the odd listener if they bothered to come up and talk to us. I spent 40% of my time talking to listeners from the podcast. A number wanted their photographs taken with us. That was so humbling. That really was very humbling to have that happen. I just didn't believe it. And the last part is the show was absolutely monstrous, and we had good fun. And Frank and I got in all sorts of trouble, but hey, that was good. Moving on, the other little things I've done since I've been back, I've been playing with my SDR Play. There's a piece of software you can run instead of the Uno software that allows you to turn it into a spectrum analyzer, and I was using that the other day. Yeah, using that the other day, and DigiLink have sent me a analog Discovery 2 to evaluate. So in the next few weeks, I'm going to see what I can do with it and give you guys a bit of an evaluation on it, because it's on initial looks, it's a very, very, very clever piece of kit. So that's what I've been up to. So on that note, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for joining us. I'd like to thank Chris M0TCH.
Cheers, Martin. It's been the usual fun.
Yeah, we have had fun tonight. Mr. Martin Rothwell, who I don't know who's been the naughtiest, you or me tonight, Martin?
I think it'd be Frank, for that matter.
You're going to blame Frank, are you? Okay.
Well, Leslie's not here, so we've got to blame someone.
Yeah, we have, yeah. So, Mr. Frank Howell, K4FMH, thanks for joining us, Frank.
Oh, enjoyed it tremendously, guys.
Yeah. And Mr. Dan Romanchik, KB6NU. Brilliant descriptions on some of that Morse stuff, Dan. I was thoroughly enjoying it.
Oh, great. Yeah, and the feeling's mutual about meeting you all face to face. That was really was a great experience.
Yeah,
I agree. It was fantastic. Yeah.
and I think we did the right thing of hiring a house rather than a hotel, because hotels would have been very, very clinical, and you locked away in your own little cube and things like that. The
And
house
expensive.
well, yeah, okay, we did it on the cheap, but that house in Xenia, and I've got some pictures if you want for your presentation, Chris.
Oh yeah, that'd be good. Yeah,
Was a very lovely house. So
Yep.
And
it was.
sitting
That
on
was
the,
brilliant, as you guys say.
yeah, brilliant. And there we were sitting on the porch with Frank's radio on HF, drinking beer. What more can you want as a sun went down?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. So thanks very much, guys. I'll say 73 is due. This is only 73 for this section. The podcast continues afterwards. So 73, guys.
Cheers, guys. 73.
Keep your amateur ham radio podcast advert free by donating less than a length of coax. Visit www.icqpodcast.com/donate now. For all the news, links and information, visit www.icqpodcast.com.
And now it's time to have a look at the news in brief with me, Colin M6BOY. We start off with news here in South Africa because there's various events going on, starting off next weekend with the Youth Sprint, which will be on the air between 1200 and 1400 UTC on Saturday the 15th of June. This is helping to promote Kids Day, and there'll be all day long activities between 80 down to 10 metres. 17th of June, World QRP Day. There'll be activities going there, and also between the 20th and the 24th of June, you can participate in the SARL Top Band QSL party and work towards your Top Band certificate. So as always, we'll put a link to this on the ICQ podcast page, and you can check out more information from there. News here that German radio amateurs are going to be permitted to take place in contests operating on the 15 MHz band, and this is a area they're going to be allowed to use between the 1st of May and the 30th of September. So a couple of notices here talking about them having access between 50.0 to 51 megahertz, and as I say, lots of different orders allowing different types of operation that's going on. So again, because it's a little bit technical, lots of information here, we'll pop this again on the website, and you can check that out if that's of interest to you. So you might be visiting Germany this summer on holiday, and certainly great to have those bands and opportunities available, say if you wish. Ofcom are looking for a new chief executive. Sharon White is stepping down as chief executive. She's leaving to become chairman of retailer the John Lewis Partnership. She's expected to leave Ofcom at the turn of the year. She joined the organisation in 2015 from Her Majesty's Treasury, and Lord Burns, the Ofcom chairman, has said Sharon has been an outstanding chief executive for Ofcom and will be missed by the whole organisation. Under Sharon's leadership, Ofcom has helped to deliver ultra-fast broadband, widespread 4G mobile and now 5G services, and became the first independent regulator of the BBC. So, as I say, it looks like Ofcom will be announcing their successor, maybe around the end of the year, as they begin the process of finding someone to replace Sharon White. Well, now we head over to our features episode. Double for you this episode. We've got a review of a novel called Equinox, which features amateur radio as part of that book. And we've also catched up with BYLARA as they celebrate their 40th anniversary. So as always, guys, hope you enjoy.
And now what you've all been waiting for, this episode's feature from the ICQ podcast.
Hello, this is Frank, K4FMH, with a review for the ICQ podcast. My review today is of a science fiction novel, Equinox, by Dennis Barrett, call sign N4ECW. It's available on Amazon and many other booksellers. The author holds both a Juris Doctorate, that is a law degree, and a PhD in engineering. He resides in Land O'Lakes, Florida, where he and his wife, Marilyn, K1ECW, have a prayer ministry. Now, these two themes, religion and engineering, figure prominently in Barrett's first novel, Equinox, and ham radio is far more than a throw-in. Comprising 19 chapters, Dr. Barrett weaves a tale born of the Book of Revelations in the Bible, where an extraterrestrial species of locusts land from the sky in Florida and begin their dominance of the United States and perhaps the world. The narrative begins as Dr. Barrett no doubt revisits some experiences he himself had in defending his dissertation before a committee of professors, as your reviewer has done and then mentored a number of PhD students at several large universities himself. From this departure, the author weaves a tale of how leaders emerge rather than are born, and how the crowdsourced nature of amateur radio organization self-organizes in times of need, and of course, how blood and guts, sex and mystery shape this invasion of locusts in Equinox. I note in passing that the ARRL is never mentioned in the narrative for emergency communications. Amateur radio operators will find the book interesting because of the details about ham radio hardware and the bands that we operate on. It's not a whodunit spoiler for me to say that the author is rather partial to ICOM equipment. In real life, Barrett owned an antenna company which advertised on the commercial shortwave powerhouse WTWW near Nashville, Tennessee. Now, the actual manager of WTWW, Ted Randall, is a core character in Equinox. He's been renamed as Ted Wright, the voice of freedom on-air personality. But it's Ted. The religious theme in the book fits WTWW2 as that station's owners and some of the programming on their transmitter is of a religious nature. The fictional narrative can be thought of as part Falling Skies, the TV series from 2011 to 2015, part Doomsday Book of Revelations interpretation, and part modern prepper movement. The central character in Falling Skies was a college professor before inadvertently becoming the titular leader of a movement to defend the world against hybrid creatures resembling locusts, claws and all. It's not everyone's cup of tea, but many ham operators should like it. The book has been selling well on Amazon, enough to encourage both movie and TV interest, as well as sequel work by the author. To make some critical comments, I'll qualify them as follows. I've been involved in the publishing business for some 40 years, both as an author and editor, albeit on the nonfiction side of social science. The central leadership character remains a mystery to the reader in terms of how the author develops that persona. The same for the female military officer who becomes intimate with him in the text. Sometimes this is done to leave numerous hooks for future sequels, but in my opinion, some further development of that character was perhaps warranted. The closeout of the book was a bit hurried too. Ending such a drama could have used another chapter. Again, it's a style that leaves open future work, but the reader is left with somewhat of a literary thud to close the novel. The author's interview on another podcast openly acknowledged my final criticism, which appears to be out of his hands and on Amazon. We were sent a printed copy of Equinox for the ICQ podcast to review. I volunteered given my editing background. It was handed off to me at the Xenia Ham Pension, where I promptly failed to pack it when we departed our Airbnb house in Lebanon. Absent-minded former college professor? Yes, guilty as charged. So in my embarrassment when I got home, I purchased the ebook version of Equinox from Amazon. The formatting is atrocious. I first thought that the author should have tested it, as there are testing platforms available for preparing ebooks for publication on Amazon. But Dr. Barrett insists that this is on Amazon's hands, as they reformat text to fit many reading platforms. So I'll take him at his word. But the reader should beware of this if they go to buy it via the Kindle store on Amazon, which frankly is what I do with most books these days myself. I'll close with this. I like the book, criticisms aside. It bodes well for amateur radio, beyond the product and hobby placement in many TV shows and movies, such as the Numbers Station movie starring John Cusack, the movie Frequency with Dennis Quaid and Jim Caviezel, and of course, the well-publicized Last Man Standing with Dennis Allen. Dr. Barrett should write again. I'm Frank, K4FMH, Fox Mike Hotel for the ICQ podcast.
Hi guys, for this episode I wanted to talk about the British Young Ladies Amateur Radio Association. Now, I was lucky enough last year in 2018 to catch up with Judith, G4IAQ, who is the Honorary President, Treasurer and Webmistress of the British Young Ladies Amateur Radio Association. Now, they like to be called BYLARA, which is their initials for the British Young Ladies Amateur Radio Association. I was also lucky to meet up with Carol and Jenny there, and I sat down, did an interview, and you'll be able to see that on our YouTube channel. However, 2019 is BYLARA's 40th anniversary. 40 years this association's been going, so a little bit about them. The British Young Ladies Amateur Radio Association was founded in April 1979, and the idea was to further promote YL operation in Britain, to promote friendship, to stimulate interest, and to encourage good operating techniques, and all in all be courteous at all times on the band. Now, BYLARA is not just a group of ladies who decided to give themselves a name and just go out there and do it. They're also affiliated to the RSGB and effectively have become a club in their own right. So, they've been around and they've done some really good things. Now, they tend to turn up at rallies, and while you guys are rushing around looking at all the bits of equipment you want to buy and the latest rig and all those sort of things, the young ladies might be missed. If you do so, you're making a big mistake. They're very welcoming, and they'll talk to you about what they do. They also do a fair bit of charity work, and they tend to be quite a caring group in their own right with their members. Now, what else do they do? Well, they have activity days. The 6th of every month is one of their activity days. They call CQYL on the hour on a frequency ending in 88. Now, you'd have to check their website for full details on this, but, frequency ending in 88, love and kisses. They are, as I say, a very friendly bunch and would love to talk to you guys. Apart from that, they do a lot of rallies. They do a fair amount of charitable work, and in fairness, as I talk forward, they're a very, very, very friendly bunch. Now, this year being their 40th anniversary, to celebrate that, they're now running a special event station where you can get an award. The special event station is GB40BYL, and say nice call sign there, girls. It's to celebrate their 40th year. It's been active from April 2019 throughout the rest of the year, so there's no excuse for not working them. And they will give you a certificate if you make a minimum of 40 contacts. One contact a day will count towards the award. So you technically, I suppose, could work the same person 40 days running and get your award. But that would, why limit yourself to just talking to one young lady when there are lots of them out there? And as I say, I've come across a few that have joined recently, and they thoroughly enjoy being members of BYLARA's, so certainly worth a look. Now, it's not just a UK thing, and the ladies have been very active to get involved with other associations around the world. And there are other groups around the world that, as I say, have benefited from doing this as well. Now, if I've missed any groups, I'll apologise, but ones that we can talk about is the Scandinavian YL Radio Amateurs, the Canadian Ladies Amateur Radio Association, the Young Ladies Radio League, the Australian Ladies Amateur Radio Association, the New Zealand Women Amateur Radio Operators, and the Japan Lady Radio Society. So this is kind of going global, and if you have a YL or an XYL in the hobby, I'm sure that they would love to talk to BYLARA. And guys, find out more about it. I know there are some guys in the background that help out, mainly because I know Judy's husband is an amateur as well. And once again, they do a lot of good work. So promoting amateur radio to the ladies' hobby. And it must be a little bit difficult for ladies in this hobby because it is predominantly a male hobby. And I know when I've become the minority, it does feel a bit uncomfortable. So, all power to their elbow. They are the minority in the hobby, but they are making room and promoting the hobby and actually doing more work than most of us amateurs do. So, in fairness, I wish BYLARA a very happy 40th anniversary. I wish Judith and her team great success going forward, and hopefully I'll meet up with them later in the year in Newark, the UK National Ham Fest. So hopefully this was of interest.
Hi, Mrs. B here. The guys thank you very much for your downloads. However, there are a few things that would help the ICQ podcast to continue to grow. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We need you, and it's free. 73's Mrs. B.
Well, thanks there to Frank, Kilo 4 Foxtrot Mike Hotel, for his review of the Equinox novel. I hope you enjoyed Frank's review there. And congrats to you as well for catching up with the lovely people at BYLARA, and they're celebrating their 40th anniversary. It's good to catch up with them again, wasn't it, after we spoke to them last year at UK Hamfest?
Certainly was, and the girls at BYLARA are always very, very friendly group to chat to. So look out for them, and they do a lot of good in our hobby.
Yeah, so mailbag time now. So we've got a piece of mail came in from Pete Caffery, who drops a line. His call sign is Kilo 5 Papa Delta Charlie. He says, "Hi fellas, listening to the episode from Hamvention with the interview with ICOM on remote operations. He's been contemplating the HF mobile while waiting to pick up the kids from school. And if you could hook up his IC7300 to the internet at home and operate via a hotspot, it would limit the hassle setting up a rig in the family van. He says this would alleviate having to buy or dedicate one of the HF rigs to the van, and he's very excited about this." So, I mean, there was actually quite a few people, weren't there, doing remote rig control at Hamvention. One of them obviously was the ICOM solution we looked at there with Ray Novak. So I say, there's options for Pete, isn't there, as he contemplates what to do next, isn't there?
Certainly is, Colin. And Pete, in fairness, the option you have is either the ICOM route, which is more than likely going to work exactly as it should do, or the third-party route. Now, there are great pieces of software out from most manufacturers, and there are some very good third-party applications. The advantage of going with a manufacturer's piece of software is it's predominantly written to run with your specific rig, and they should, and I emphasize should, be able to sort problems out if you find something a bit obscure. Going with a third-party piece of software, and there's some good ones out there, and we looked at the MFJ one while we were in Dayton, and there are many others out there, but there's some good pieces of third-party software, but they're written for multiple radios, and in fairness, in the particular interview we were doing was with ICOM. They were showing us their remote rig application, and yes, it works very well with theirs. So for your point of view, Pete, I would suggest the ICOM software is possibly your best bet.
Yeah, I suppose it's the one where if all your stuff's ICOM, it probably makes sense going that route. Maybe if you have a mixture of stuff that you want to plug into remote operations, then maybe one of the third-party solutions might be an option where you maybe could trade off a lack of maybe a little bit of functionality on one rig to have a lot of functionality across many. But say certainly lots of options out there for you. So Pete, let us know which way you went, and we'd be interested to know, as I say, what you're doing there. And as I say, I think it's a good idea though, operating HF mobile where you're waiting for the kids to come out of school. I think that's a great idea. Right, well, we need to wrap up a few bits and pieces, as I say. So, as always, keep updated what we're doing in between episodes by visiting icqpodcast.com. You can sign up to the newsletter there to keep updated with what, as I say, new news stories are on the website in the meantime. You can also sign up to our Facebook group. You can also catch up with us on our Twitter handles at M1MRB and at Colin Butler on Twitter. The YouTube videos are available from Dayton Hamvention, and we hope to have a new video up there soon as well. So best way to do is go to youtube.com/ICQ podcast, where you can see all the stuff on there from, as I say, the previous exhibitions, etc. we've been to. As always, we'd ask you to consider donating and keeping us advert free and the podcast shown in the newsletter, and you can do it just by visiting www.icqpodcast.com/donate, and you can send a donation, be it a one-off or a monthly subscription like Phil Stevenson, Kilo Zero Papa Whiskey Sierra sent us, and as I say, that helps us keep the show advert free for you, pays our way, and as I say, make sure we don't have to start selling you dodgy tablets and mattresses and God knows what else in the process. So we really appreciate that. Talk about appreciating people, we'd like to thank our contributors to the News Roundtable who gave up their time for you this episode. So that's Chris, Mike Zero, Tango Charlie Hotel, Martin, Mike Zero, Sierra Golf Lima, Dan, Kilo Bravo 6, November Uniform, and Frank, Kilo 4, Foxtrot Mike Hotel, for their very kind time and donating their time to us this episode. Right, I think that just about sums up everybody we need to thank and everything we need to do here. Probably apart from one last very important person. As I say, it's time for tea making and Chucky Bicky finding. And talking about that, maybe I should bring some over me this weekend as I head over, as I say, for a feature we're working on.
Yeah, certainly should, Colin. I think your mum's going to be pleased to see you when you're over tomorrow. So that'll be good news. And I'm about to... get ready for your mum coming in from work, make her a cup of tea, get that Chocky Bicky ready, and look forward to seeing her when she comes in. So it's all good in my camp, Colin.
All good. Well, listen, let's bid 73s and we can get this show wrapped up and in the can and we'll start working on the next feature. So I'm going to bid you all 73s and catch up all again in a fortnight's time.
Yep, 73.